Okay, so all that's left to do is to mix it. I mixed it on the desk. I did a hybrid version, but every channel is coming back to the desk again. I kept the same setup as the recording session, so the desk channels are going to be the same. I cleared all the EQs that I used in the recording. I didn't need those anymore because I don't need to double down on that EQ setting. And every EQ setting that was on the monitor path, I switched over to the channel path so I could have those EQs and tweak those further. Did a few things differently than the recording session because I wanted to have a bit more control over everything. One is that the lexicon was first in a mono split, so auxiliary 1 was going to machine A on the lexicon and getting a stereo output over there with the large hall, and auxiliary 2 was going to machine B on the lexicon and getting its own separate stereo output with a medium room, if I recall correctly. And now I decided to make it a stereo split, so now I can send in everything on 1 and 2 as a stereo set and 2 reverb types come out. So I can only control one input of the lexicon, but I can get 2 different reverbs on the output, 2 different stereo reverbs. So that gives me more control in shaping that sound. And all the other reverbs I needed, I fixed with plugins in a box. So there's the piano. I made a VCA for the pianos. As you can see, I made a bunch of VCAs. I made a VCA for the strings as well. And what that allows me to do is writing the faders all together. I don't have this desk set up to be automated with Pro Tools. They are motorized faders, but they only work with the SSL computer, so they don't work with Pro Tools. And I also can't automate the auxiliaries, and I can in Pro Tools. So anything that just stays fixed here, I put on the desk, and everything that I need more control over, I do in the box. Then we've got the vocal, and in the recording I sent the vocal to 21 and then took the insert sent it to the distressor, and then went back into the vocal parallel on channel 22 in the insert return. That's a really nice trick for the recording. I decided I didn't really like that style of parallel compression, so I went another route. What I did was, if you hold control, you can select multiple outputs. So if I have output 21, I select control and I put output 22, it goes to output 21 and 22. We're going to see what compressor I use later, but I'm going over the session first. Then I've got all the strings, so there's some automation. I needed some extra reverb here and there, and then I've got a bunch of desk mixes I did, and then I've got some auxiliaries. Let's just go and play a bit, and then I'll come back and we'll look at some of the treatment I did.
Have you ever really wondered why it's always so simple? My heart beats all day for me, for you, so simple. Simple, but love, hey.
I've got the piano and the vocal over here, so let's start with the piano, what I did on the piano. I'll film everything on the desk with my iPhone. Try to keep it as still as possible. We've got the main piano over there, so you can see a little bit of a dip around 900 to get some more room for the vocal. And the rest I just left alone. No dynamics, nothing on the insert. That's it. Let's solo that 87 piano. So I like that more without this EQ, but in the entire context of the mix, I think I needed to get that bit out of there to get some more room for the vocal. In the box, I did some treatment on it. Of course, the decapitator. I use the decapitator, the E setting. I'll take everything off. just a bit of drive, just a bit of extra harmonics, making it a bit thicker, rounder. Yeah, that really worked for me. We've got several saturation stages. The mics have a certain type of saturation, the preamps have a certain type of saturation, the desk has a type of saturation. So we've already got all of that analog flavor in there. I just needed a little touch of decapitator because sometimes you just know, all right, I need that flavor and that's gonna work. Remember, it's all colors, no matter if you have plugins, hardware, vintage stuff, new stuff, it's all just flavors, and pick the right flavor for the right setting. This time, this was the right flavor for the right setting. Then I've got a Fairchild on there. Even if I wanted to, I could not afford or get a real Fairchild, so I will forever keep using the plugin, I guess. Maybe I'll get an unfairchild or something somewhere along the way, but yeah, not right now. I'm just compressing lightly and I've got it on mix. My thought process behind this was that I wanted some dynamic control and I wanted to get that from a processed parallel channel beneath it and going through the Fairchild vibe. So let's see how much that compresses and how that sounds. So that's barely compressing. It's like 2 dB, and maybe I could have done 100% mix, but I just wanted to stay true to that parallel processing thing and keeping it like that. I think it sounded great. It just felt great at that time, and sometimes you make mix decisions that just feel great at that specific time, and you just go with it. Then some Pultec EQ. I already had the massive passive on there in the recording to boost some lows and some highs. You can see the settings over here. I didn't use the massive passive in the mix. I just used these settings in the recording stage and I didn't change them since then. But I needed some more low-end roundness and I grabbed the Pultec. Just needed it to be fuller, bigger. Another thing I did is over here, this part where the strings are barely playing, I wanted to get the piano more featured. So I pulled up the automation on the low boost on the Pultec. So the piano gets even bigger over there and then leaves some room once the strings jump back in. That's things I can only do in the box. I can't sit here and automate these things or engaging the EQs while we're playing the mix because that would just mess everything up. So I love plugins for that. I've got a bit of EQ on the hammers and that is just getting a bit of 5K. Remember the mics on the hammers were only for that transient high-end info. So I just want to get that high-end info out of there. And that's also why I compressed them a little bit, just to get those transients to push through, just slide them in. They're really low on the fader as well. It's a lot of the 87s and then a bit of the 84s to go along with that. Then I've got the periscope. Let's just have a listen to the periscope because the periscope just sounds really cool. So even though that is at the end of the piano and it's really close to the piano strings, it picks up all of the strings. It picks up his vocal as well. So everything, every mic in that room is connected to each other. So if I push anything up on the desk, if I push any faders up, if I make the strings louder, if I make the periscope louder, if I make the vocal louder, that's going to affect every other sound in this mix. And that is a blessing and a curse. That means the vocal mic is going to function as a room mic for the strings, but it also means that we cannot edit anything and that we need to make sure that the recording is done absolutely great, because if there's too much pill, that's really hard to deal with. Also, that is why you need really high-end mics, because a mic can sound great from here, but the spill a mic picks up, that can sound pretty horrible if you have a bad mic. A lot of people would set up an SM7 on the vocal because they think that picks up less spill. I actually tried it during a live recording session and its difference is not that big. The main difference is how the spill sounds. And if you have great spill, it sounds great. If you have awful spill, yeah, that's just not gonna sound nice. All right, let's head over to the vocal. We've got the vocal and we've got the vocal parallel. I'm just going to play the normal lead vocal for now. I will leave all the processing on first, and then we'll take everything off and build it back up again.
Have you ever really wondered why it's always so simple? My heart beats all day for me, for you, so simple.
Let's go over the analog gear first. So I already had a touch of EQ going in the recording and I decided to double down on that. I had some EQ on the Neve, of course, and I had a little bit of EQ on the SSL. I didn't do that much though. I put up, this is the SSL EQ, I put up a little bit of, what is that, 3K? A little bit under 3K and a bit like 7K. Just a push up. And then I put some dynamics on there as well that compresses maybe 1 or 2 dB. Maybe the light comes on, maybe it doesn't. And on the insert, I've got the CL1B, a medium slow attack, a fast-ish release, lowest ratio, and then just dialing in the threshold. I'll just play a bit and then you can see how much I'm compressing.
Have you ever really wondered why it's always so simple? My heart beats all.
So I'm barely compressing. All the level control I'm doing in the box with fader rights and volume automation because I really want to have this as natural as possible. And if a compressor does that by himself, then it clamps down on all the peaks and everything in between, which is the spill from all the other instruments, gets louder. Which is also something you need to think about when you're doing parallel compression on a vocal, because now we're squashing it and we're taking up all of that spill and we're setting that as a block underneath that vocal. But that for me, it worked this time. You get a little bit more spill from the rest. But because it's such a great mic, the Flea 47, that spill sounds great and it functions as a sort of a room mic. So on that parallel, I've got a bit of EQ. I took out some 300 hertz and that's it. And then that goes to the 1178 over here. And I'll just play it and show you how much that is compressing.
Party, then fuck ends up in love, but love, eh?
That's a lot of compression. That would never work on its own. It's really pumping, but it really helps because he sings like this. It really helps tame that and tone that down and keeping that on a consistent level because I can't dig in that much into the clip gaining without making him sound unnatural. Okay, that's the analog part of things. Then we've got some EQ, just surgical EQ on the Pro Q3. I tried that on the SSL EQ, but I can never get clean cut. And with the Pro Q3, I can be really precise where I want to take out how much. And especially with the dynamic EQ points over here, that's perfect. I love that about the Pro Q3. Lo-fi, love lo-fi, 0.2, 0.2. Then a de-esser. I did manually de-ess, of course, but I also use a de-esser just to go over the bits I missed. Then we've got some soothe. Let's see what soothe is doing.
Rock that party, then fuck ends up in love, Rock that party, then fuck ends up in love.
Soothe just makes the EQ moves you cannot do. There's something about soothe, it makes your vocal, if your vocal is on 90%, it makes sure your vocal gets to 100% done. Analog is amazing, but you don't have soothe in analog, you know? You don't have those type of tools in analog. So you grab what you need from which domain and you make that work. I did not use the other reverbs and delays on this track. I just used the lexicon for that. I did use a bit of slap just to give it a bit of room, I'll take the other ones out, and I'll take the lexicon out as well.
Love came the struggle, start with
All right, that's on 17.7. I'll exaggerate that.
love came the struggle, start with fucking.
So that is really to give it some width and to set it into a room without making a room reverb, because a room reverb takes up a lot of space, and there's already a room reverb because he's already singing in the room and being picked up by all of those other mics in the room, including our room mics. So I don't need a room reverb there, I just need a slap to make it sound like he's in a room and add a sense of depth. Then we've got a chorus.
Love came the struggle, start with fucking. If you rock that party, then fucking.
That again is just for a stereo bubble around it. I sometimes use a doubler or a chorus. Either work really great. So on this track, I just used the slap in the chorus just to give it a bit more width and roominess around it. I didn't really feel any delay throws, reverb throws whatsoever on his vocal. I did that more on the strings. So I kept his vocal a bit more straight to the point at the same setting, and then the strings and the piano really dance around that and make that support around him. I'll just first play you a piece of the strings, just strings. So let's solo that VCA. That's also nice that you can, I've got a VCA for the strings here as well. I can do this as well, but then my reverbs get muted. So I've got a VCA for the strings here, and then only the strings play right now. But they still go to the reverb, and the reverb's not on mute. Long story short, here's the strings. And even though he is not playing or singing that loud, you can still hear it in all of those mics. You just can't go crazy like you can in a mix of a produced song where everything, every single thing is isolated. Everything is connected to each other, and if I push up anything, something else comes with it. So that's something you really need to think about with every move you make. The intro, I love the intro on the strings.
Have you
So on that, I really wanted it to start a bit drier and then going away really dreamy, because they're fading out by themselves, and then I want a reverb that picks that up. I couldn't do that with the lexicon, of course, because then with every pass I would need to be fader writing it. So I grabbed an EMT 140 plate. It's a pretty long plate. Yeah, it's all the way maxed out. It's as long as it can be. I don't know how long that is, but it's 5+ seconds with some lo-fi before it, just to saturate that input of that reverb to give it a bit more vibe, and then just automating everything up by the same amount. I could go in and see what needs more reverb or less, but this just felt great, and as soon as it doesn't feel great anymore, I'll just take something down and set it again. Then I did minor EQ adjustments over here, like this is just a frequency that poked out. I add some saturation. Oh, I didn't even do anything. I just put up a lo-fi plugin without even doing anything. One notch, one notch. It's really, really simple. Of course, on the cello, a bit of body. Let's see what that was before. gets a bit louder, but it also gets a bit bigger, a bit beefier, and it just fills up more because that cello really needed to get more of that supportive role. Then the bass low, wow, 2 notches. So one is dynamic because for some notes that he played, I just had some resonance, and this is just to clear out some low mids and make some room for the rest of everything. And this is mainly making room for the vocal and the piano. Panning wise, I mainly set that during the recording and I follow what they're doing over there, except the bass for me needs to stay in the center. I can put the bass high all the way on the right because then that makes sense, but I'm not putting that bass over there. It's a string section on a pop song. It's not an orchestra that needs to have some panning in a classical way. I do need to stay kind of true to what my room mics are doing, so I want to set every instrument where it is in that room mic picture, but the bass is still staying more centered because I need that support, that low end energy in the center. Then I'll just quickly go over some of the EQs. It's just minor stuff. It's just listening to where what is. Also, if you're recording strings, you've got different mics, different room, different instruments, different players. So it's going to be completely different. And yeah, EQ is so general. I can show you my EQ settings, but maybe if I mix this song another time or with another plugin or with another desk or whatever, I make different EQ choices. So I'll go over them just to show you what settings I've ended up with, and then we'll go on to something else. We've got violin here. Needed to take out some highs around 4K, pushing up a bit of 8K, high pass filtering on everything except the bass low. The bass low is also the only one that has compression on it, bit of a higher ratio. This one is set down, so it's an auto attack, just slightly touching the compressor there. Taking out some nastiness, pushing up some highs, taking out some 400, taking out some 900, just taking out. I can go over every single EQ and why I made which choice, but that's going to be a really long video. Instead, I'll take off all the processing in the box and on the desk, and we'll A/B that to see what happened. So take out all the plugins and take off the reverbs. This is without any processing, just dry as I recorded it. And this is with everything on. Then we've got the room mics, and I just pushed those in slightly. I didn't do anything really crazy. I just wanted a bit of that room sound and a bit of that vibe in there. That's the back room. So you can hear that that is doing a lot for that low end of that bass. And it gives it a really low-endy, warm, round room sound. And then we've got the main room mics, and those are mainly to paint the picture that is happening in that room. From one perspective, our perspective, the control room perspective, listening to what's happening over there, getting that overview and then blending everything in there as well. I'll push those up as well, play those, see how they sound. So in these room mics, you can clearly hear that the piano is more towards that side, the vocal is slightly to the left, the bass and the cello are over there, and the strings are in the back. So you can really already hear that picture of what's going on in the room, and then you can slide up everything accordingly. So you've got a really detailed picture of what's going on inside that room, and also it's going to function as a room reverb. But now every single element has its own pre-delay and reflection. So you can artificially give every single instrument its own reverb with its own pre-delay and early reflection settings and everything to recreate that. But that's a hell of a job. And now you've got that already. You've got that sense of depth in there, that overview of that room, and that really helps with getting the depth in that mix later on. Then we've got the reverb, which is the Lexicon, the real Lexicon 480L. Machine A has a hall, program 4, medium plus stage, that has a reverb length of 1.74 seconds, and it has a pre-delay of 46 milliseconds. So that's more to the front of the room. Then we've got machine B, which is on rooms, program 3, that's a medium room with a length of 0.5 seconds and a pre-delay of 0 milliseconds. So that's more to the back of the room. So they're getting a reverb to the front of the room and the back of the room. Then I used the Portico Master Bus processor on the main mix. I used the Silk in red. I pushed it quite a bit up. I didn't use the compressor. I did use the SFE. I really needed the SFE because I'm pushing up a lot of the high end in the mid signal. It's a mid-side processor, it's a mid-side EQ. So I'm pushing up a lot of the high end in the mids and the low mids in the sides. So that really, really brings that mix even more to life. I'll bypass everything, the Silk and the SFE, and then I'll take it back in. So that's on bypass.
I wrote my own script, then I gotta fix fucking work problem. I write a love song about all the people that in drugs and alcohol, they're fighting in the war zone. Not the best for all, but hey, the switch is on, gonna fix it all. She's waiting at the basketball, found her after all.
So that Silk really puts that nasty high mid in there, and I kind of like that because it pierces through in every system. I did a lot of sibilance control, so it's not going to be that heavy. It gives it a vibe for me. Maybe someone wants it a bit darker. I'm usually the one that says it needs to be darker, but this time I really like this setting, and the SFE on the low mids, giving that width on the low mids. I love that. I love width on the low mids. Get my mix huge in the low mids. I love that. I think that's it. That was the entire recording and mixing process of Newark.